Welcome to the Independent Dealer Podcast with hosts Luke Godwin and Jeff Watson, a podcast by dealers for dealers. Here we go.
Hello, welcome to this episode of the Independent Dealer Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Dealership Consulting. Luke, we have a special guest from your neck of the woods this week, don't we?
Yeah, Jack Handegan. Did I say that right, Jack?
You did.
Okay. So Jack's down in Charleston, South Carolina. Been in business 4 or 5 years, something like that. And very specialized. And I think this will be a cool episode of what we're doing here. Jack, say hello to everybody.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
So, Jack, let's start at the beginning. What industry did you come from? What got you in the car business?
So we'll go back to high school. Always loved cars, loved four-wheelers, loved anything with an engine, loved taking them apart, loved buying and selling them. And basically, when I was 15, I was offered a 1997 Silverado for $2,000. That was all the money I had at the time for play money. So I bought it and I sold it for $4,500. And I remember thinking I scorched the earth. That kind of got that going. So all through high school and college, I bought and sold cars. I was actually a historic preservation major at the College of Charleston. I was working for a design firm and found a warehouse near my house for lease, realized it could be zoned for this, and kind of dove in head first, had no idea what I was doing, never worked in a dealership, didn't know. I remember the first car I bought at Manheim, I didn't know how to get the car out. I didn't know how to pay for it. I remember just feeling like I was going to throw up after I won the bid on simulcast. And then that just, fueled the fury.
I still feel the same way. Every time I win a bid on simulcast, I feel like I'm going to throw up. Like,
what did I do? I'm the last idiot.
Yeah, especially right now.
Yeah.
That's interesting, Jack. And I think originally when you first started, you really had you like Mercedes and higher end cars. You still, is that still part of your
Definitely.
Your jam?
So yeah, definitely. So, the first car I ever bought, that car I was just talking about, was a 2010 Mercedes GLK out of Manheim, Fort Lauderdale. I'll never forget it. And so for 2 or 3 years, I did a few classic Mercedes because I knew them really well. But my main bread and butter up to COVID was off-lease Mercedes. I was using Mercedes-Benz on demand, which some of our listeners may know about.
Oh, yeah.
But I'd get on there and I'd buy GLEs, C300, cars that were under warranty and that didn't need much recon. And then I'd buy some that did because I could take the time to find the random little pieces on eBay and stuff. So, yeah, that was my main thing. And, prior to COVID, I was selling just me I was doing like 120 to 130 a year, which is very small. But for me, it was huge and it was a lot.
Well, in a single, if it's just you and your overhead load, selling 10 a month is great, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And it was, the first year I opened in October. I think I sold 4 cars during that 2 or 3 month period. I didn't really make any money, but I was learning, and I had to learn quick because I didn't know I didn't know any of these words, PSI. All the, the stuff that we now know is so normal having a dealer software. So it was learning quickly. And it's like I say, every time I lose money, I call it paying for car school because I learn best when I touch the stove. So,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Did you, because the whole aspect of a warehouse dealership, that's fairly new. Did you know that's what you want to do initially, or did
it is. And I'm 29, so I'm a millennial, but I saw how many people were going online. Personally, I would go online and look for a car, and I'd go on Auto Trader. I'd go 500 miles out, and that's calling on cars. So I realized that I didn't need Charleston real estate on a main thoroughfare is astronomical. I could never afford it. So the warehouse thing was nice because it's by appointment, so I could be flexible. And it worked out. And I think they're getting a little bit tighter on that, as far as allowing that. But hopefully I'm grandfathered in or something.
Hopefully with Charleston. Then, so are you still selling a good many of the Mercedes and higher end cars?
So COVID hit, and like everyone who's listening to this knows, the inventory went like this. and no sale, no sale, no sale. And then suddenly, everything was selling MMR over. So I kind of pivoted during COVID. I sold a few cars on Bring a Trailer and did fairly well. And I kind of just had a wake up call. I was like, this is what I really like. I like old stuff. It takes a lot more effort and a lot more recon and a lot more specialty stuff. It takes a lot longer to get listed, but I like it. And that's all I'm doing now, 100%. No retail sales, just Bring a Trailer and the occasional eBay.
Well, I mean, I've seen some of the things you've run on there, and I'm sure your grosses on there are a little bit better than than the other.
It is, and some you hope for something and you don't get it, and then some you hope for something you get way above it. So it's like everything. There's mediums to it.
How did you know? I mean, it seems like pivoting like that is you're going up against guys that have been doing it for a couple decades, and if you're specializing in, say, Mercedes still, you've got these guys that are just like, they eat, sleep, drink, and breathe it for the last 50 years of their life. And you're trying to battle against them to not only source these from private parties or auctions, but also know what it's going to bring on the open market. How does that learning curve happen? Where are you getting that knowledge?
Well, so I did this always as a hobby with classic Mercedes, doing kind of, I wouldn't say restoration, but making them nicer. And, what I realized on Bring a Trailer, it's all about the seller. It's all about, how their vibe, how happy they are. If they start to smell blood, the trolls will eat you up like a shark. So you have to learn to answer the questions. You need to have the answers. But yeah, that pivot was just, I don't really know how it happened. I just suddenly had a bunch of old Mercedes. I just started looking for them.
Yeah.
And how, I don't want you to give away any of your secrets, but we know that giving away secrets, nobody ever uses them anyway. So what's your primary way of sourcing? I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of money in Charleston. There's a lot of those cars around. Is that your main focus?
So truthfully, I probably source 90% of my stuff out of state. So one thing I did do during COVID is I canceled my Auto Trader. I had Car Gurus, I had Auto Trader, I had cars.com, and then I had one other lead source generator. So I was paying all those guys monthly. So I canceled all that. And I said, I'm going to take my money and put it into local advertising, Facebook targeted ads, and I just put some pictures of older Porsche, older Mercedes. And I said, I buy classic cars. I've got a Silverado that I use for random stuff. And I have a big sticker on the rear windshield that says, I buy classic cars. So a lot of that, and then a lot of word of mouth, but definitely not needing that Auto Trader, not needing that cars.com allowed that money to go towards other advertising. Let's sit on Craigslist and Facebook and eBay and Hemmings for 10 hours a day.
Yeah. So what was the first car you got listed on Bring a Trailer? Kind of walk us through that and that first experience and how it worked.
So the first car was actually as I was starting my dealership, and I needed to sell it to fund the dealership, and it was a 72 Mercedes. And Bring a Trailer was a little bit easier, and they weren't as popular then. So you'd submit a car and it would get listed in 2 or 3 weeks. Right now it's about 6 to 8 weeks, and I don't get any.
What?
Yeah, it's
Wait,
6
hold
to
on.
8.
I don't understand how this website works. I don't even think that exists in Utah. But you're telling me you send a car to these people and it takes 16 weeks for them to
so what happens
put it live?
So say you have an 89 Mercedes 560 SL. So you go in to Bring a Trailer, you'd hit submit a vehicle, you put the VIN, you put the history, original paintwork. They send you through a bunch of questions, and then they ask for a picture of the title. They usually want videos and photos and that kind of stuff. So it is pretty detailed. And I will say, based on their popularity right now, they're probably turning down. I don't know. I don't probably have any right to be saying this, but I think they're turning down a lot of cars. So what I quickly have learned is if you're going to submit a car and Bring a Trailer, for people who are listening, if you're going to do it, don't half-ass it. Get really killer photos, really good videos, detail it way more than you think you need to, and have the car 100% ready, because if it's not ready, it's you get fed to the sharks.
How many pictures are you submitting?
I think I'm at probably around 100 to 150 a car. And then what I also like to do, and this is just me, I put up paint meter reading photos. I do a cold start video, a walk around video showing interior, exterior, and then I do a driving video with a GoPro.
How long do you figure it takes you to put that together, that package to submit?
A long time. That, between detailing aside, the photo aspect of it and then uploading the photos and making sure they're the right ones, that's probably 4 to 5 hours. And then the videos, maybe another 3 hours. So maybe 8 or so hours spent on that. And I wait for the lighting to be right. Like today would be a bad day for it. I'm just really OCD about stuff. And I think that makes a difference on the sale.
For sure. I know we send cars to Classic Car Auction, and I don't really deal with any of the Mercedes and cars of that nature. It's just not, we don't know that stuff. So what I like about Classic Car Auction, we get it ready, and sometimes they're not 100% ready, and you can see the difference in what they bring. And sometimes they're ready. But yeah, all I do is I put them on a truck and I send them to Classic Car Auction, which is to me a lot easier. But I probably don't get the gross that you get on there.
The one thing, a nice thing about the Bring a Trailer is I love meeting the people I sell the cars to. I've never met them in person. Every car gets shipped out of state, but they're always good connections. The other good thing is I pay $99 to list the car, and that's it.
That's a good problem, because I've had some cars at Classic Car Auction that cost me $6,000, $7,000 to sell it, which is is a big number. 10
or 15%, and then transporting the car there and stuff. So I enjoy it, and frankly, the 6 weeks gives me time. Sometimes I'll get the car ready, photographed, detailed, and submitted, and then I'll go have the services done, have the tires done. So it gives me some time being one person.
That just surprises me. I guess in a classic car, it's only going up in price over those 6 weeks and not necessarily down, hopefully, huh?
Yeah, right now. I mean, truthfully, there's some cars that I've sold on Bring a Trailer just 4 or 5 months ago that I think now are probably worth $10,000 to $15,000 more than they sold for. And at the time they were sold, and I was like, whoa, that's strong. Now
I've got a 2010 Ford Fiesta that has the same story. So I think that's
exactly right.
Luckily, that's the case with everything. But that is super interesting to me. It sounds like you would have to sit on a handful of money or flooring line, things like that. Do you ever get you buy into something? It seems like that would eat me alive if I had to sit 6 weeks knowing that I know I paid too much and I'm putting it on there and I'm not sure. I mean, I've got some cars that give me anxiety, and they're like, I got to have this thing gone by Friday because I just don't want to look at it anymore. Like, how do you deal with that?
So the way I deal with that, and trust me, I buy a lot of cars sight unseen, and I kind of roll the dice. I probably get, out of every 10 cars, maybe 2 or 3 that I just instantly kicked somewhere. Whether it's a buddy or a friend, because, it's still a good deal and there's money to be made, but it's not worth waiting 6 or 8 weeks, Okay. So luckily I've been pretty lucky in that sense that I haven't gotten a total dog, but, it'll happen.
Jack, how do you, the reason we've been successful a lot of times in the classic car auction genre is because my dad grew up during the era of muscle cars that we're selling. Okay. So he can remember when the car was new. My grandfather was a Ford dealer when the car was new. So we have a lot of information already that he's obtained over the years. We've probably owned 150 classic Mustangs. So we know that. We know the Broncos. We know the F-150s. We know those things. How can someone who didn't grow up during that and doesn't have that knowledge, how do you gain that information on the cars you're listing?
So that's a good point. And that's one thing I'll say is I specialize in older Mercedes because I really know those cars. I can look at one and say, that's the wrong deck lid, or that's the wrong handle. That's the wrong clamp. But I've learned, just for example, I just bought a 67 Mercedes 230 SL. I've always loved that generation of car, but I didn't know much about them. Well, I quickly learned that I paid too much for the car. And this will be a good way for me to learn in the future what to look for, down to little things like having the correct fender welds, having the right textured dash pad. And if it's incorrect, the guys lose their mind on it. So I try to stay really safe on the stuff I know. And the reason I know those cars is because I've owned them over the years. I'm on the forums. I'm on YouTube. I look at other Bring a Trailer auctions. So I've learned those cars. But for example, I bought a Chevelle SS. This was before I was a dealer, and I was
now that's something I know. So
it was a 66. It was a 138 code. It was butternut. It was the real deal. But I had a guy come look at it from a Chevelle forum. I put it on. He said the markings on the control arms aren't right. And it's little things like, he goes, and that's been switched from that. Little stuff that you look at it and you go, that's a beautiful car and it's perfect. But those things are a $10,000 or $15,000 swing in value. So I try to stay in my lane and stay with what I know. And I know there's guys who know everything about every single car. I don't see how you can, but for now I try to stay safe because
you really have to. Like, you've got to say, I'm only going to deal with Mercedes in the 1960 to 1970 era. And I'm only maybe even going to stick with these couple models because it's infinite. I mean, it's just, you cannot know everything about every classic car. Exactly. And if you try, it's like dealers, right? I'm a buy here, pay here dealer. And the second I start stepping out of my realm of what is a good buy here, pay here car, that's when I get my hand slapped and I lose money because I'm trying to be everything to everyone.
Right. And to your point about just sending cars to collector car auctions, that's a great way to make good money. And the good thing about it is, that car is available for one day for a preview, and then it runs across the block for 45 seconds. Yeah. Well, on Bring a Trailer, your car's up there for 7 days. And frankly, some of the people that are on there, they're in their parents' basement and they're looking through every photo.
Can't afford nothing. Yeah.
They'll go in photo number 78. It appears that the trim has been replaced. Can you confirm if that's an OEM part? I mean, you have got to have an ironclad vehicle and you've got to know what you're doing. If not, I just watched a car yesterday. It was a 280 SE and the guy bought it on Bring a Trailer for $28,000 a year ago. And he put about $7,000 more in it. In the auction, so he relisted it, enjoyed it for a year, relisted it. In the auctions, the people came out of the woodwork noting every little thing. The seatbelt anchors were incorrect. He lost about $15,000 on that car because, you make money on the buy, of course, but because those trolls came out, that's better not say trolls.
I've got this written down, trolls on BAT. So,
they have no intention of buying. They don't have the money and they have no intention of buying it. They just want to tear it up to prove how smart they are.
Exactly. And there's no doubt about it. These guys are absolute knowledge mills. I mean, if you look at some of the air-cooled Porsche, I would never list an air-cooled Porsche on there because there's just no way. I mean, these guys know so much little minute stuff that it does matter. The stuff they're pointing out does matter. But unfortunately, you will see a lot of guys, they'll have zero. It shows you when you click on a username, they'll say they've bought X amount of cars. They've bid on this. They'll have 0 bids and they'll have 8,000 comments. And you do get a lot of guys who don't really know, and they can screw an auction up by going for example, I had a 560 SL and they drill in the rear fascia for the European the European license plate and the American license plate. So there's 8 holes on the rear. And he said, unfortunately, this car appears to have been drilled. This is a common mistake and should never be done as it can cause rust. And I had 3 other 560 SLs. I said, that's on every single car that's original. But if a seller was not knowing that, he might have said, oh, I'm sorry. And then people read that and it can ruin your auction.
Yeah. So, that actually happens at classic car auctions too. You'll go out there and somebody be checking your car out and they don't know that you're the owner, and they'll start talking about your car and they'll say, well, this car this is done to it. And then finally you just got to go, stop. You don't know what you're talking about. I've had tons of these cars, or, I've done it to people too. Like, they're advertising a GT Mustang as a GT Mustang, and I crawl up underneath it because there's 3 or 4 specific, bolt holes that it has to be a GT. And I go, that car's not a GT. They go, yeah, it is. I bought it as a GT. Yeah, you got screwed.
Yeah,
but
you paid for a GT, you didn't get a GT. But yeah, so
exactly.
there's definitely there. I use the word trolls endearingly. It's not horrible slight to them, but there's definitely some really great information on there. I mean, stuff you would never know that you should know. And then there's guys that just sit on there trying to comment on everything. And some people really get off on derailing an auction. I mean, it really, you can tell they went there, they came, they saw, they conquered, and they pointed out everything wrong with your car.
Hey guys, sorry for the interruption in the podcast, but we need to talk about Buckeye Dealership Consulting there, Jeff.
Yeah, the great sponsor of the podcast, great guys over there for your reinsurance needs. So whether you buy here, pay here, a retail lot, I'm sure if you're selling classic cars on Bring a Trailer, there's probably some opportunity to reinsure there as well. So
I would assume so, because there's always a chance to reinsure a risk that your dealership's taking, and that's what Buckeye Dealership Consulting wants to let you know. They have all kind of products from PSI to VSI, CPI. Guys and gals, to build wealth in this industry and to do it the right way, reinsurance is the only way. And these guys can help you out there. Right, Jeff?
Yep. Yeah. Talk to Buckeye. And now back to the podcast.
So
what I find is interesting, Jack and Luke, we've talked about this before, but we say this all the time. Like, if I were to start another dealership right now, maybe with the one I have or a side project, I would do a very specific dealership. And that's what I think is really cool here, Jack. You found a niche, and you found money inside of that niche. Like, I may do an electric vehicle only dealership, or I might do a Jeep only dealership, or I might do a Mustang or a Corvette only dealership, because you're becoming valuable to that group of people. You're not trying to be everything to everyone. And I find that super interesting, how when you become that expert, man, there's still a lot of money in those tiny, tiny little niches.
There are, and there's so many of them. And I'll tell you, once I get on something, like, I just sold a bunch of really low mileage Silverado Z71s. And, once I learn them, I'll start buying them. And one thing I did in college is I bought and sold a lot of low mileage Crown Victoria police interceptors.
Oh, yeah.
So I would find them with, 10, 15,000 miles and buy them and put them on eBay. And they sold like crazy, and the margins were huge. So I've always enjoyed those little weird niche stuff that you're like, really, someone's into that, but they're out there. You just got to find them, and then you got to know them.
I've found that about really low mileage cars is, and this is for everybody, no matter what type of car it is, if it's super low mile and it's got a story behind it, that car usually makes money, right, Jack?
Someone wants it. The stuff that you're like, why would someone want a low mileage Eagle Talent? There's somebody out there and they want it, and they want it bad. I just sold a 4,200 mile F-150, and it's going to Australia. And this guy has a warehouse full of low mileage 80s trucks, and he had to have it. So
that's interesting. How many countries have you sold to, Jack?
Just in the past few months, I sold a W111 Mercedes coupe to Sweden. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Let me ignore it. To Sweden. I sold a 56 Plymouth to Norway, I think it was. And then that one's going to Australia. So over the years, a lot of countries. And, truthfully, usually those are the cars I don't make much money on for some reason. I don't know why, but it's nice to see them leave.
I've sold it. So back in, I think in like 04 or so, we started selling a lot of cars on eBay, and it was just interesting to see the market and how it was evolving. And I really wish I wouldn't have stopped. And I just didn't have enough time. Like Jeff says, you can't be everything to everybody. And what I should have done was open something like you had on the side and did that. You weren't selling cars back then, but what has changed from the eBay form of selling cars? Because you said you were selling cars on eBay to the BAT. What is it? The comments on the photos? What else is there that's different?
One of the really nice thing about Bring a Trailer sales, if somebody bids it, they're buying it. I mean, I think their sale.
eBay. Oh,
yeah. Oh, eBay, I think I read somewhere their sale follow through is like under 60%.
I believe that.
On cars. And Bring a Trailers is above 98%, if not 99 point something. So everyone who's on there is the real deal. They don't just go dark or say, my mother told me I couldn't buy, they buy it. Another thing, Bring a Trailer charges the fee to their credit card the minute the auction closes, and they are not getting that fee back if they don't follow through. So
that's huge.
Really good.
I was so frustrated about that on eBay so many times where I sold cars and just never, the people ghosted. They've been in the last second and then ghost you, and that's just horrible.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I had it happen to me 3 times on a car this year that I didn't want to send to Bring a Trailer. 3 times. I mean, not a good batting average.
Are you still selling cars on eBay then?
Yeah, occasionally. Like I said, some of the ones that I don't feel like waiting on Bring a Trailer, I get the car in and I go, this is not something I'm going to put on Bring a Trailer because it's not going to do well with the crowd. I will send to eBay and, occasionally get a good experience, but they're few and far between.
Are you helping anybody with financing on these? Are these some people that are having to finance, or is this really just bring a check, bring a trailer, bring a check,
bring a check?
Yeah, bring a trailer, bring a grocery bag of money. No, they're every seller or every buyer that I've sold to pays cash, and I will say that the buyers on Bring a Trailer are extremely wealthy. I always Google my buyers just because it's fun to see where cars are going.
So Jack, let me ask you that. So I think a lot of people are scared of this, sell a car, ship it across the country, ship it internationally. Give us just real quick your litmus test for does Bring a Trailer facilitate payments, or do you have to buy it? Everything has to be done outside of it. So you're taking wire transfers. I mean, when you say cash, these people they're not FedExing you a box of cash.
No, and I will only take wires. There's just too many cash check scams going on right now. So I would say more than 50% of the cars I sell to, the buyer has an LLC set up for their collection, and they'll just send me a wire, and then I send them the paperwork, and they get it notarized, which is something I've started implementing. And they sign the paperwork and send it back and set up transportation. So I've never had issues.
So when you say do a wire, you're taking this random person who just won your bid, you're giving them your routing number and your checking number and saying, wire me my money.
We have a special account for wires. That's what you got to do.
Yeah. Okay. So you have a zero balance account for wires.
Yes.
It's like a clearing account. So that, and, before I send them that, they send me copies of their driver's license or the business license. So, I do a little bit of Googling and stuff, but yeah, I mean, some of the people that have bought cars on there are billionaires. I've had a few on there that are very, very, very wealthy. And, if they want it, they buy it, and their secretary takes. Pretty crazy. I mean, it's definitely amazing.
Do you develop those relationships as now in your Rolodex of like, hey, I know you're interested in Mercedes of this year. I'm going to contact you the next time I have one.
Yeah, sort of. And a lot of people who bought cars have said, hey, I'm looking for this. And I've got a freaking notebook on my desk of people's names and what they're looking for. And, so I have some people that I've made good friendships with off of Bring a Trailer. And then I've had some people that they've sent a wire and I've never talked to them, or that's been a secondary situation. So those are not new. I mean, it's,
It seems like that's the ultimate kind of pinnacle of this avenue you're in, is becoming the just having that Rolodex of people where exactly where to offload a car the second you buy it and who to call, and
Yeah, and it's nice because with Bring a Trailer, the buyer has 7 days to do their due diligence. And I provide pictures of any flaws. I'll put a picture up with my finger pointing to it, do the paint meter reading. So that's another thing is I learned. I mean, when I was in high school, when I would flip cars, it wasn't always 100% honesty. There was, and I quickly learned within like 2 or 3 cars, like, not worth it. So I either fix everything I can. I mean, everything to like, some people are like, that doesn't need to be done. I'm like, do it, or just disclose. Cause then when they get the car, everybody's happy. That's one thing I've always wanted.
The first car I ever sold on eBay, never forget this, y'all. It was the third car. The first car I ever sold was a 92 or so Volvo station wagon.
Those were hot.
They were hot back then. And The next one, I can't remember what it was, but the third, I think it was the third car, was a Saab. And, Saabs in South Carolina, nobody wants them. And nobody may want them anywhere anymore. But so this guy drives up from Atlanta, I think, and he gets here and he tears the car apart. I mean, he was the ultimate Saab buyer and just berated me on how I had listed the car. And back then, as I recall, you could only put about 25, maybe 30 pictures on eBay. It may not even been that many. It may have been 16.
I think it probably was 10 or 15. Yeah.
The guy just tore me up. And I was just like what you're talking about. Right then I said, you've got to over describe everything you're doing. And that's the only way this is ever going to work.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, so since I started my dealership, I've always strived for 5 stars. And there have been times where I've given people concessions where on some of our dealer groups, I've said, what would you do? And everyone says, tell them to go F themselves.
Yeah.
But I've always been about, even if they're wrong, if it cost me $500,000, I will do it just to keep people happy. And one of the first Bring a Trailer sales I had, I sold a car to a guy and I could kind of feel the energy that it was going to be a headache. And he got the car and started complaining. I said, I'll buy the car back plus your transport, plus whatever else you paid, plus your fees and everything. And he didn't want to do it. And it became a nightmare. And he wouldn't sign a repair agreement, which I learned about through one of the groups. I mean, I can't tell you how much of this business I learned from these Facebook groups, down to just the smallest little thing. So I have had one deal like that, and you try to cut them loose and you offer them above and beyond. They still won't take it. I mean, what do? You get a bad review from it. So
yeah, Jack, what happens when you offer, because I've had this happen before, offer to buy the car back plus transportation, and they don't want to do that? Is that someone just being, what's going on there?
That's the one time I've ever had a real upset customer. And that everyone else, I've never had a bad review. I had one fake one. I don't know who did it, but I tried everything. And so we eventually came to an agreement, and he had found some rust under a spare tire that was hidden under a compartment. It's something I would have disclosed, because I would have disclosed it or had somebody fix it. It was a $300 thing. So he got a body shop quote for $800, which I thought was absurd. And it was in Ohio, and it needed to be flatbedded. So I said, let's flatbed it so it doesn't rust or whatever. And I said, and I'll pay you $300 for your time. So I was offering him $1,500, just signed the goodwill agreement. He wouldn't do it. And this same guy tried to buy the car back. So eventually I just said, listen, I can't make everyone happy all the time. So cut my losses and just kind of moved on. It still bugs me to this day, but I mean, I wouldn't have changed how I handled it. That's for sure.
What I find is so interesting. I was laying in bed last night actually thinking about this, and we all have these auctions, right? What made me start thinking about it was these middlemen, right? There's a lot of middleman wholesalers, right? They buy from one dealership and they run it to the auction and flip it, and they've made great money doing it. But as technology evolves, it's starting to cut out the middleman. And not only, the wholesalers, but technically it could cut out us dealers at some point, right?
Right. Yeah.
But what's evolved is these auctions, right? Like ACV and backlots and things like that are now trying to go dealer to dealer. They're trying to cut out that wholesaler and just say, hey, I can list something at my lot here at my dealership and sell it directly to you and use this, ACV as a middleman. It sounds interesting to me that if you had something like BAT for dealers, what BAT is just a very, very strongly vetted group of buyers and sellers, right? It's really hard to get in. It's once you're in, you don't want to get kicked out. If you had a platform like that was a dealer to dealer platform where it's you had all these very specific requirements, and it's only the best of the best. And once you get in as a seller, you do everything to keep your reputation. And once you get in as a buyer, you do everything to keep your reputation and stay in there. That would be a super interesting kind of an organic type website to set up where dealers can sell to other dealers. And it's a complete above board on your honor type network.
Yeah. And to your point about vetted sellers, it's kind of, not to sound cocky, but I have a little bit of a reputation on Bring a Trailer where I feel like if I put a certain car on there, it'll bring more than most sellers would be able to sell for it. And to put it in, the terms that people understand. It's like when you're buying a car from Robert Hollinshead, you're willing to pay a little bit more from a car that's coming from his lane than one that's coming from so-and-so used car lot in the middle of nowhere. You just get a little bit more comfort knowing that, someone's going to stand behind it. In that sense, talking about, who you're buying from and what you're buying.
Yeah. And I mean, you're exactly right, because he developed that over the years, and that's the reason he is who he is, which is, and that's kind of how it is on the retail side. The reason we can still do business, because we've been doing it the same way 35 years, and we do it the right way.
And what dealers need to understand is it builds on itself, right? So Jack, when you started and you had to front that guy the money on that bad buy or the bad sell, it was probably hard for you to be like, okay, I'm going to make nothing on this car, but what I'm doing is investing in my future. And I think what, the bad dealers in the community do is they're looking to take advantage of everyone. They're not looking to give anything. And then it's just this slowly kind of downward spiral of their dealership, where a bad reputation, and then they start having to cheap sell stuff just to get it out. Then they don't make money, and then they get a bad reputation. Whereas someone like you're like, I'm going to spend some money to keep my reputation good, which actually in the long run is going to make me more money. And same with Luke. Yeah. His dealership has a reputation where like he can charge a premium because people want to buy from him because they know the car is going to be, so it's kind of that upward.
Yeah. And I think, if somebody was new listening to this podcast, thinking about starting a dealer, has never done it, try to make everyone happy. You'll never do it, but boy, if you try, it goes such a long way. And I look at it from a retail standpoint. I just bought a car for myself personally, and everything at the auction was super high. And, I was calling around dealerships all over the country, and I'd look at their Google reviews. And if their Google reviews were in the can, I wouldn't even call on it, just because, and that's enough. And I like to think that I still think as a consumer, even though I'm a dealer, I mean, those good reviews are worth their weight in gold. I mean, fight for them if you can. If it's a $300 alternator, my God, do it.
That's, it's something to be said also, and to go down this rabbit hole, but there's something to be said about making sure when you open up a business that you're capitalized properly to be able to make those decisions. Because if you're not, if you go out and you don't have the money, it's hard for you to be able to help people. But the problem is if you don't make those right decisions up front, you're never going to make it. And that, that sucks.
Yeah, definitely. It's worth it.
Jack, are you seeing another course of like another trend that you want to get into, another car maybe you want to start focusing on? Do you see something coming up?
I don't. I try to keep my eyes open, trying to find stuff. And, it's so funny because I see a lot in the car groups. They go, man, these Acura NSXs are really on fire right now. And going back to your point, it's like, yeah, my 99 Crown Victoria everything is on fire. I mean, every muscle cars, Japanese cars, hybrids, everything is through the roof. So I do think a lot of guys on Bring a Trailer right now are buying cars hedging against inflation. I think a lot of people are, like, your money in the bank right now is losing every week, it seems like. So I think a lot of people are buying cars, classic cars, to hedge against that, and because they're fun. COVID, yeah. I think a lot of people over COVID were bored, bought projects, and hopefully that'll keep going.
Yeah, what's that tipping point, Luke, where I hold on to a car long enough that it actually starts appreciating? Because I've got some of these out here that I've had for a minute or two, but I'm just hoping that I hit the bottom of that thing and start going back up.
In 20 years, that 03 Honda Accord, somebody's going to want that, I promise you.
So, yeah, but what's interesting is in the last 2 months, we've seen 17% consumer index pricing increase from the used automotive side. So, we've never seen this before. And I would probably argue within the last 4 months, we've seen close to a 30% increase in consumer price index. So what we're seeing right now is not going to continue, and it's not going to be here forever. So, we got to figure out how to make money the right way.
I mean, I'll never forget being in the group and learning and reading your post. And thank you so much for all the questions you answered, because, that stuff means a lot to me. And there's a lot of guys in the group who answered my questions. There's a lot of those groups you ask a question and they're like, really? You just get roasted. And I'm like, but there's a lot of people in that group that made a big difference in my life. And that stuff sounds cheesy, but it means a lot. And so definitely thank you for all that.
Well, we appreciate that, and we hopefully putting these things out here like this. You're out there helping somebody now, so that's what you're supposed to do, right, Jeff?
Yep.
Yep.
All right,
Awesome, Jack.
Yeah.
Hey, appreciate your time. This has been super informational. It does make me realize then, like, there's those niches. Stay in your lane. Don't get too excited by the shiny pennies, because that's sometimes when you can get hurt, man. So it's a good reminder
Jeff,
for all of us.
Get on Bring a Trailer and check it out. It's a great website, and some of the stuff on there is just so cool. And it's anything from $1 million Ferraris to like a Saturn, a 2001 Saturn with 140 miles that somebody found. So it's everything
that they still want $1 million for.
And that's the stuff that I like. I like a 4,200 mile Ford F-150 from the 80s. A newer Ferrari, doesn't do anything for me.
And just I don't want to prolong this because I know we were wrapping it up, but is this not dying? How can these still be out there? It just blows my mind that someone's like, oh, I just happen to have this 1980 F-150 sitting in my barn and it's got 100 original miles. Like, how is that even? I just don't get what rocks are these cars sitting under. I just don't get it.
It's crazy.
And especially now that everything's bringing so much money, a lot of it's coming out of the woodwork. Because people are like, now was the time to sell. But yeah, definitely.
That's a good point. I could see an upswing in used cars. They've been sitting on Dad's Mustang forever, thinking that it's only worth, $5,000, and then they stick their head in the forums and find out it's worth 20. Yeah. And maybe it changes things for them. Yeah,
and unfortunately, a lot of people. It's somebody put in one of the groups the other day talking about classic cars as investment pieces, and somebody was talking about I think it was a Grand National and how it sold for $140,000. But then somebody did the math. If you took the money from the Grand National and put it on in like the NASDAQ or something, you'd be worth 5 or 10 million, something crazy.
Yeah. So, it's collecting classic cars really is fun. There's a little bit of investing there, but we've had cars that's appreciated a lot that we've had them but for 5 years. But then when I think about, if I'd have had that in the market, the return, I don't know.
If you'd bought Dogecoin with it, right?
The one-off nonsense. Right. So tell me this, do you ever have an ethical issue? And again, I started to keep dragging this out, but when you show up to that old lady's house and she is selling her granddad's whatever, and she had it listed at like $5,000, and you're about to turn this thing for 25 on BAT. Do you ever have like an ethical thing where it's like, sweetheart, I can't give you $5,000 for this. I got to give you 10. You have no idea what you have. I just can't take advantage of you.
That's an interesting idea. I'll try that next time. But one thing I've learned, there's two things. A friend of mine told me when I first started, he said, profit's not a bad word. So don't feel bad about making profit. But I'll tell you, if I see a good buy, I don't haggle. I mean, if the money's there, even if they're a little over and it's an easy deal, just do it. I don't, it's like, I try to watch pennies when I can, but I've gotten to the point where it's like, let's just do it and do it right. So I haven't had any of those situations though, where I feel really bad. I will say, I drive a Lincoln Town Car when I go look at cars. I did daily at driving S-Class. I drive a Genesis G90, but my going and looking at cars vehicle is a Lincoln Town Car.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So.
All right. Well, Jack, thanks for being here, man. We learned a lot today.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, this is awesome. I love this.
So glad you joined us. Please take a minute to leave us a review and share this podcast with a friend. The Independent Dealer Podcast. Dealers helping dealers.